Hey guys, welcome back to Legal Marketing Live, presented by Spotlight Branding. I'm Daniel Decker. I'm joined again today by Ben Sarver, our Director of Client Services. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Ben. So we're going to talk about what I think is a pretty cool topic. We're going to talk about the anatomy of how to create an effective blog entry. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about a cool promotion that we're running this month and next month actually. So we're calling it the Referral Raffle. And basically what it means is if you guys know a lawyer or a law firm that would benefit from our services and you send them our way, you can get entered into a raffle to win 3 great prizes. I think we're giving away a MacBook Pro, we're giving away your choice of a Gucci handbag, and we're giving away a Callaway golf set, driver, and bag, correct?
Right, yeah.
And if you win the raffle, you get your choice of any one of those 3 prizes, and the value of each of those will be $2,000. So pretty cool promotion. We're excited about it. Hope you guys will join. Jana, if you could drop that link in the comments, that would be fantastic. And just click on through and send us that information, and we'll take great care of anybody you send our way. So thank you guys for that. All right, Ben, so let's dive in today. We're going to talk about blogging and specifically kind of an anatomy of what makes an effective blog post for a law firm. So before we do that, why don't you just talk a little bit about your background and maybe mention the thousands of blog posts that you've written for us over the years.
Absolutely. So before I was Director of Client Services here, I started out as a content writer. The bulk of that content was definitely blogging, website content, social media content, but blogging first and foremost, really. And I think we calculated it out at some point. It was well over 1,000 blogs I had written. So definitely quite a bit of experience writing legal blogs. I've kind of seen every angle of it at this point. So
yeah, awesome. And we've talked quite a bit in previous episodes here, as well as on our blog and elsewhere, kind of about the importance of blogging from a strategic standpoint. So we're not going to jump into that here. If you guys are interested in why you should blog, I invite you to check out some of the previous episodes of Legal Marketing Live. Also check out our own blog because we write about that pretty extensively. So today we're going to kind of assume that you guys are on the same page, that it is important to be blogging.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what that looks like. Obviously, we'd love it if you called us and let us take that off your plate. We have a pretty good system. We think we're pretty good at it. But we want to provide value for those of you who want to do it yourself as well. So let's start there, Ben. Let's start at the very beginning. You've got a blog that you need to write. How do you come up with a topic? How should our listeners out there come up with the topic?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's several different schools of thought on, exactly what you should be blogging about. There are people that take the approach of kind of making them news related. There are people that take the approach of making them very personal. The way that we have found works best, in our opinion, is really to focus on practical information. Coming up with topics that are going to be practical for your potential audience, your potential clientele. And what that means is, based on your practice area, based on what services you provide as a lawyer, you really need to focus in on the different questions that your audience might have about what you do and what services you provide.
Yeah, okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I agree. So I think there's a time and place maybe for those other types of blog articles. Like if you really want to share about a personal experience that you had and a lesson that you learned, great, so be it. But I think first and foremost, you should focus on those practical topics that your clients and potential clients are asking. Right? Because,
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, let's give some examples of that. So let's say you run a family law firm and you do a lot of divorce. What are some topics that a divorce lawyer should write about?
So just one quick example could be something along the lines of 5 financial steps that you should be taking to prepare yourself for a divorce. Divorce has a major financial impact on families, and it really causes a lot of upheaval in your finances. So as an attorney blogging about it, you would want to write something that helps people prep themselves, helps them take steps that are going to, help them properly prepare to get divorced from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great example. I really love that topic because you've got a bunch of, potential clients out there who are thinking through the divorce process and so they're kind of overwhelmed. They're not sure where they should start, and a lot of them may not even have considered like the financial ramifications of it. So a blog entry like that kind of meets them right where they are and answers a common question that they have. Other ones that come to mind to me, could be something like, sorry, I had a little background noise over there. Something like, how does child support work in my state? or how is child custody determined in my state?
Again, and taking that very practical approach, what are these elements of the divorce that I need to know about? And it's important to remember, you're not writing a legal brief here. You're not writing for lawyers. You're writing for the people that are getting divorced that don't have a legal background.
Right.
So they need that, very straightforward, easily digestible information that's going to, quickly and efficiently answer the questions that they have.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. All right, so let's talk about maybe one other practice area. Let's talk about business. Let's
Sure.
say you're a business attorney. You specialize in working with small business owners. What are some topic ideas you'd throw out there?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important ones, a really great one to focus in on, is the different entity options available for a small business owner. Talking about, do you want to incorporate your practice? Do you want to make it an LLC? How is it going to be taxed if you choose these different entities? So to actually frame it as a topic, 3 entity options available to small business owners.
Yeah.
Something along those lines that presents the different options and the pros and cons of those options.
Yeah. Love it. So bottom line, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's practical.
Mm-hmm.
It's questions that your potential clients are asking,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea is you give them the answers to the immediate questions, and then you position yourself as the expert. So when they are ready to actually call somebody and go forward with the incorporation or the LLC, whatever it is, you've kind of built that credibility and that rapport.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the tone you should take, right? Because you guys out there, attorneys, are highly educated. You guys are probably good writers. You're used to writing, legal briefs, and back in the day, you wrote in, for law school, and you were critiqued by law professors and all of that. So you have probably one style of writing that comes most naturally to you, but I don't think that's how we want your blogs to read, right? So let's talk a little bit about tone.
Absolutely, and I touched on that a little bit before. It's really important to remember who your audience is. You're not writing for someone that has an in-depth legal background most of the time. People joke about legalese. That's a real issue. Including a ton of legalese is really just going to make it almost impossible for your average everyday person to really understand what's going on and follow the blog and actually gain that valuable information.
And then it becomes counterproductive, right?
Absolutely.
Because if kind of the whole point of the blog is to kind of establish that rapport and make the reader a little bit more comfortable with you, then they open it up and they just see a bunch of what looks to them like a foreign language. Well, now they're even more scared of you than they were to begin with.
Right, and I think it's a really common trap because a lot of attorneys want to demonstrate their knowledge.
Yeah.
They want to show I am an expert and I know what I'm doing, and look at me, I understand these lofty topics, and sometimes that can come off in a way that turns off your average everyday reader because they're not really going to understand. They're not going to feel connected to you. As you said, you're not going to make that personal connection, and it's not going to really give them the value that you're hoping it will.
There's a sales saying out there that the confused mind doesn't buy, right? So when someone is confused, just it's human nature, we're reluctant to step forward into really anything if we don't understand what's going on. So if you're throwing blog entries out at people that overwhelm them and scare them, they are much less likely to take a step forward and visit your office for a consultation or whatever the case may be. So,
exactly.
So I think that's huge. I think you have to have the right tone.
Yep.
Just on that note, I think format is important too, since we're talking about writing that appears on the internet, and I think it's important to stay away from big paragraphs, right? Huge walls of text. I think you should look for short paragraphs.
Absolutely.
3 sentences.
We use the term digestible. You want it to be easily digestible for your clientele, for your audience. We kind of talked about it when we've talked in the past about website content. You want the attention span of these readers typically is very short. The studies show that people do not stay on web pages for very long. So you have to be able to convey a lot of information very quickly. So that that can mean breaking it up into a numbered list. That can mean using bullet points to kind of outline your key points. There's a lot of different ways that you can make a blog more scannable, more skimmable, so that someone can just glance over it and get the key information they need without really, reading every single word.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super important point, is that most people are not going to read every word, and so use headlines, make sure the key points get across easily, even for someone that doesn't read. every word. So on that note, what about length? So like, how long should these blog entries be?
Sure, and that that goes right along with that attention span. It can be a problem to make them too long. At the same time, you don't want them to be too short. We typically find the sweet spot to be somewhere between 400 and 600 words.
Yeah.
500 is kind of that standard, that industry standard of a single blog.
Yep.
So again, if you start running super long, 800 words, 1,000 words,
Yeah.
that's just going to end up, like you said, kind of confusing the reader, or turning them off. They're going to lose interest in it. They're going to move on from it without getting to the information that they really need.
No, I agree, and I agree with the 400 to 600 word recommendation. I would say, if anything, if you're going to err in one side or the other, err on the short side.
Right.
Honestly, even a 350 or 300 word blog entry can be helpful.
Right.
And again, so many people, they land on a page and they see a huge wall of text and they're like, nope, I'm not going to make this commitment, I'm out.
Yeah.
So, even if your 600, 700 word blog entry has great content in it, if it looks overwhelming, it might never get digested. So, so I would definitely say err on the side of shorter.
Sure.
All right, so we've talked about how to choose a topic. We've talked about the tone, the format, the length. Let's talk about how frequently we think that lawyers should blog. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. So, we really try to say a minimum of once a month. At the very least, try to get some new content out there. Try to get a new blog out there once per month. If you're able to get to a point where you can do 4 a month, do weekly blogs, that's fantastic. That's even better. Obviously, attorneys are very busy. We understand that it can be difficult to hit that point, but that would be optimal. Would be for once per week, but once a month, I think, at a minimum.
Yeah, I think if you do it once a month, you've got a consistent flow of new content.
Right.
You're giving people a reason to come back and check your blog frequently. You've got sort of some ammunition you can take out there and stick in your email newsletter or stick out on social media. And I think if you do once a month, you're in a good place, honestly. Yeah. And there's a lot of attorneys out there that have dabbled in blogging and talk about blogging, but the amount of people that actually consistently blog on a regular basis, at least once a month, is very small. And what happens so often is people get fired up about blogging. And so maybe in like the first 2 weeks, they write a bunch of posts, but pretty quickly they lose enthusiasm and it becomes a back burner priority for them.
Yeah.
So even if you're only able to get one blog post out per month, you're actually in a really good place.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of look at it as the old saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
It's about that long-term consistency of your blog more than anything.
Yep.
When a reader comes to a blog that had a bunch of it had 6, 7, 8 posts all within a couple weeks of each other, and then there's been nothing for 8 months. That is a major hit to credibility. It makes it seem like you're not active. It makes it seem like it just doesn't look very good.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point to make. I think it can raise questions about how seriously you take your practice.
Right.
If it's obvious that you just do this stuff kind of in fits and starts. So,
Right.
All right. So I guess last thing we'll talk about here is so we're creating these great blog posts, and then what should we do with them? What do we recommend that lawyers do with them in order to get them seen and kind of leverage them fully?
Sure. Again, it's kind of that old another old saying that if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. If you write a blog and no one sees it,
right,
it's not going to do anything.
Right.
So you've got to put some effort into getting it out there. Newsletters are one of the best methods for doing that. Stick that new blog, your most recent blog, in a newsletter. Send it out to every contact you have.
Yeah.
Post it on social media. Post your most recent blogs, even a couple times a month if you really want to get it out there. There's a lot of great ways that you can push it to your audience.
Yeah. And if you take the approach that we talked about earlier in terms of topic, where you're writing topics that are sort of evergreen because they're just focused on answering common questions that your clients have, you should really continue to push them out there on social media and through your newsletters, because that article that you wrote 3 months ago, it might not have been relevant to person X back when you wrote it. But guess what? 4 months later, all of a sudden he's thinking about divorce, and now all of a sudden that blog entry is very relevant. So definitely, if you take the approach that we're recommending to kind of create that evergreen content, you should also promote it regularly. And I agree with the newsletter. Like everyone should have an email newsletter, and part of your email newsletter should be featured blog entries. And then the other big one is social media.
Sure.
And then the last thing I would say is don't bury it on your website. If at all possible, put a little widget, on your homepage that maybe just shows your most recent blog entry or your most recent couple of blog entries,
Sure.
so that people that land on your homepage will see what you're doing, see what you're up to, and again, it's a great way to make sure that those blog entries are seen.
Absolutely. And one more key point about disseminating the blogs and getting them out there, it kind of serves a dual role of, when you send out a blog topic that says, here are 5 financial tips to prepare you for divorce, even if no one reads that blog, they know, they read that title, they know that you handle divorce cases. They associate you with that title and that topic and know that you actually do that. We hear all the time, lawyers hear from their clients, oh, I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you practiced in that area. And when you use your blogs in that way to make it really clear, make clear topics, make it really easy, and then disseminate it out to your audience, even if they never read the blog, it's going to serve a purpose. It's going to, help them understand what you do.
Yeah, great point. I couldn't agree more. All right, well, I think we're about out of time here. I think this was helpful. I hope you guys get some value out of it. Obviously, again, we understand that you're busy, and one of the things we do here at Spotlight is we actually do write blog posts for attorneys, for our clients, and we have an editorial staff and a great team of writers. So we would love to help you guys out with that. If anybody's interested, we'd love to kind of tell you more about that. So feel free to reach out to us.
Sure.
But even if you're going to do it on your own, that's fantastic, and it's a really valuable marketing tool. And so I really encourage you guys to take advantage of it. And again, I hope these tips help. So Ben, thanks for joining today.
Absolutely. Thanks,
and we'll do this again next week. One more time, I just want to remind you, if you guys know any solo lawyers out there who could use our services, click on the link in our comments and join our referral raffle. We'll have a conversation with them, and it'll be a very low-pressure conversation just to figure out if there's a mutual fit. And whether or not they move forward with us, you get an entry into the referral raffle and a chance to win some great prizes. So encourage you guys to check that out. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we will see you back here next week.
Thanks.